Hello, hello, hello. Come on in. Nice wee warm welcome from the Highland Hideaway up here in Scotland. Come on in, come on in. If your day has been like mine, it's been wonderfully warm. Not necessarily Mediterranean, but from a Scottish point of view, it's been a lovely warm day. So wherever you're joining us today, this evening, I hope you've had a splendid day as far as the weather's concerned, and as far as work's been concerned, or maybe you've had a day off. Who knows? You've been maybe one of those lucky few that's been able to kick back and put the slippers on for today, but then again, maybe not. So we're just going to spend a quick minute welcoming people in. Come and join us. I'm Gary Robinson, by the way, your host for tonight. Some of you were on last week's call, which is great, or broadcast. And there'll be some new people coming to join us this evening. So it's a very relaxed affair, incidentally. You know, we're quite laid back here, but we're tackling a very serious subject, as you know. And we have a very special guest, which I'll introduce Charlotte in just a second. But first of all, I'd like to know where you are. So we've got the chat open, or we should have the chat open. So it would be great to know where you are and who you are. So hello, Zoe. Who's in Moray. Oh, I know it well. A little bit further up north. And you know for a fact that if I'm in Arbroath, I'm not in a Highland Hideaway at all because I'm in the Lowlands. So let us know where you are. Suzanne is in Stirling. Charlotte is saying hi to everybody, and Charlotte's in York. Zoe, hello, Shelley from Cornwall this evening. You're welcome. It's good to see you. Who else have we got from Orkney? Sorry, no camera, or don't you worry about it. That's not a problem at all. Hello, Michelle in Kinross and Moira in Falkirk. We have, it's Laureen in East Lothian, Joy Richardson in York, and we've got people joining us from Glasgow, from Lanarkshire, Dumbarton, Bishop Briggs and Glasgow, and Rumbling Bridge. If anybody's abroad, we had some Canadians with us last week. We would love to know if you're an international visitor. You are. Hello, Rick, from Canada. It's good to know you there. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Right. This is going to be a really interesting conversation because I first met Charlotte Davies, our guest tonight, on Sunday for what should have been a quick sort of 10, 15-minute blether, which ended up being an hour and a half. And it was a fascinating conversation. And one of the things I'm going to have to be very strict on for myself this evening is not delving too deep into the work of Charlotte, because it's absolutely fascinating, but keep on track about how we say no to the system. So before we do anything else, let's say hello, and let's go to York and say hello to Charlotte Davies. Hello, Charlotte.
Hi, Gary. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
So good to see you again. So much to talk about. You've had a fascinating life and a fascinating career, and you've said no to the system quite a few times. And I think it's fair to say that, you'll say it anyway, whether you've been battered and bruised by that experience and what you've learned from that. But before we go into that, and then there will be a Q&A, incidentally, there will be opportunities for the audience to ask questions in the last 20, 15 minutes of the program. But just if you could give us a brief resume, because you've done lots. I mean, accountancy, quality control, running a refugee camp, experienced misogyny big time in the city. There's so much you've done. And then, of course, teaching and your current status. So can you just add a little bit of colour for us to that resume?
So I graduated in 81, the year a third of British industry closed. I went into Price Waterhouse and spent 3 years experiencing misogyny, where women were good for two things, and one was making coffee. So I then ran away to Hong Kong and spent 5 years in the Far East, really growing up and getting into my own skin and working out what I wanted to do. And that's where I ran refugee camps. I discovered I liked teaching, and I came back to the UK to train as a teacher. When I came back, I had a bit of a culture shock. I couldn't understand how British students learnt. I knew worksheets were rubbish. I knew they weren't learning, but compared to the Far East, I could see things were a real mess, and I didn't really understand why. I was in a very tough school and doing my teaching practice, and the hand of the Lord came upon me, and I had appendicitis. So I came out of the tough school and went to an extremely rich school where I was very treasured, and they organised a job for me in another private school. And I spent 7 very happy years doing things like Duke of Edinburgh Award, really understanding experiential learning. And I knew I didn't understand why people couldn't really learn efficiently. I then was offered the deputy headship in a girls' grammar school, and again, that was great. The head was very creative and very much open-minded and believed in flat systems, but she eventually, just the strain of the system, caused her to get shingles and she retired. And the next head wasn't that keen on anything that was about empowerment of the staff or the students. And that coincided with my son having struggles. And what I found was that my son, who was by that stage 6, he'd been eye patched, and the eye patching of his eye had cut off links from eye to brain. And that forced me to understand how humans develop to learn. And off I went. And I worked with a South African woman who luckily wasn't that far away, who knew how to reopen pathways from eye to brain. And away we went, sorting out motor skills. Eventually, we went over to France and trained up in sound therapy. And on that journey, I tried to do consultancy work as an education consultant, but I'm not very good at being compliant. So I managed to upset the Specialist Schools Trust because I wouldn't conspire with the Harris Academy and bully a business studies teacher. And then when I went back into mainstream again, it was nearly impossible for me because I knew too much about how children learnt and I wasn't prepared to do lots of coping strategies. I started saying, no, we've got to sort out the underlying problems. And I reached that kind of corner where I knew that I was about to be constructively dismissed. I knew I couldn't go into a job interview and lie and say that I would produce results from children who weren't ready to learn. And I just thought I have no choice. I must set up my own social enterprise. And so I've been running that for about the last 15 years. Which
And all that, and you're only 25. That's fantastic.
no, I'm definitely in my mid-60s.
What I mean, absolutely wonderful. And let's unpick some of that, and hopefully you may come back to elaborate more on some of those stories at some point in the future. But obviously, we're talking about how to say no to the system. You've said no to the system on quite a few occasions, and so let's go back. When you started your teaching career here in the UK, you were at was it the fourth bottom performing school was it in England or the UK? It
In
was,
England, I think.
it,
It was on the league tables, it's fourth from bottom. The
it was,
head teacher used to lock himself in his office. The deputy head was running a travel agency, and the caretaker was dealing drugs. And they'd ripped out the boards so you couldn't write on either black or white board because they were considered racist. So how I was supposed to teach was a mystery. And I could see the children weren't learning.
and
And
was this in the 80s? Was this period in the 80s?
so the end of 80s, beginning of the 90s, so it'd be 89, 90. And I was used to Hong Kong, where we very quickly would take children in 3 months from zero to fluent English in small groups. And it'd be very, very active learning. And we could then get them into mainstream education. And what I was seeing were lots of children who couldn't speak English as a first language or had various struggles. And they'd have an adult sitting next to them whispering all day. So there'd be lots of people in the room, but productivity was zero, and no one was learning anything, and no one was fixing any of the problems thoroughly. So those children would grow up as adults with poor language skills, which would restrict everything.
So what barriers did you come up against in that school that was performing at the fourth level?
Well, it was the end of the Thatcher years anyway. There were the feeling was that there was no political commitment to state education at all, really, and that the desire was to make it ineffective. They were quite happy for things to be chaotic, to push people into the private sector, and the people stayed in state schools, they were on their own. And I think as a trainee teacher, there was not much I could do. And I saw senior teachers, some being beaten up, some one the head of business those I was working with had her room trashed because she complained about the cleaning, and she cleaned the room up. And it was, the whole thing was a chaotic mess, and nobody was sorting anything out.
Do you know whether that school's improved over the years? Is it still there?
I'm sure it's improved, but I think the way we see improvement is excluding pupils. It's not actually dealing with the root cause of the problems. It's not getting people to high level of language skills. So if you can't speak a language fluently, you can't think thoughts at a higher level. So when I was running the refugee camps, we had refugees who could speak badly Cantonese, Vietnamese, and English, but they couldn't speak any language at a higher level. So these children were doomed to have quite simple thoughts. You've got to get language to a higher level.
And then after that challenge of that school, is that when you went into the private sector
Yes,
following?
I didn't know how you think, I don't know what to do. I can't change this system. I can't improve it. I'm not going to give up a well-paid career to just burn out. I will go away and build my skills and then think about what to do and whether I'm going to stay in the UK or go somewhere else. And I really worked hard on building skills in those first 7 years. So really thinking about experiential education. I was very lucky. I could do Duke of Edinburgh Award. I could run the school tuck shop. I could teach business and economics however I wanted to teach it. I was allowed to do all sorts of interesting things with maths and technology. So it was very practical, tactile work with the younger years. So, pretty much every lesson I taught, I was able to teach at a high level and experiment and think about what I was doing and how people were learning. So
You saw
it suited me.
some real tangible results from that type of learning.
Yes, I mean
People,
one of my best was I taught bottom set maths in year 7, and one of my students insisted that he was an alien from outer space. So we spent the whole year doing salutes from another planet. Anyway, many years later, we bumped into each other again when he was dating one of the girls from the school I was working at next, and he was busy on a maths degree. Just through doing lots of tactile work, he had got to the point where he understood maths, and then off he flew.
and when you were in what sounds quite an idyllic school, actually, were there
Hmm.
any instances or examples of where you had to push back, although it sounded great, where you had to say no to that particular system?
Yes, the school was shifting from a single-sex boys' school to a mixed, and at the time they had a very small minority of girls in the sixth form, and you could see that the girls were experiencing exactly the same experience I'd had at Price Waterhouse, that they were getting harassed all the time. And we are culturally blind to the harassment of women in this country, as we've seen with the Epstein files. So protecting girls in the sixth form, and there were times when I had to say to the then head of sixth form, no, you don't know how to handle women, and so on. So, but I mean, it was never really at a confrontational level. And really, things ran reasonably smoothly, and I moved on
Did you
reasonably
feel that?
smoothly.
Did you feel you were listened to by the head of sixth form when you mentioned that?
Not by the head of sixth form for all sorts of reasons, but by the head teacher. And I felt that a lot of other staff liked the way I worked. I was well respected. I was asked to do the school timetable and things. People could see that I had, high levels of intelligence and that I enjoyed solving problems. So things were
And
going well.
and then what the journey after that, after the private school, where was next on the journey?
So I then applied to a girls' grammar school, which was quite close to me. Sutton in London has got some of the top performing grammar schools in the country. And one of them, Wallington High School, was looking for a deputy head, and the then head teacher was ex-industry herself. So getting in a deputy who got experience of working in the private sector was quite attractive to her. And she liked to have a flat hierarchy. So we didn't have a massive management team. We empowered the heads of department to be very active in the decision making and problem solving. So that was exciting place to be again. We were about solving problems, which was just as well because we were extremely cash strapped.
So you've got to be particularly creative, I take it then as well, if you're
Mm,
cash. Yeah.
yeah.
And did you find that if you are cash strapped, your teaching methods become more creative,
Well,
naturally?
I got the sixth form girls. I asked them if they wanted to do general studies, A level, or whether they wanted to do management training. And the whole lot voted for management training. So we did a double lesson a week in year 12 of management training, giving them basic skills to run the school. And they were fantastic. So they ran all the junior clubs, they did a lot of mentoring, they trained up as counsellors, they would train up as lawyers. So if some year 7, 8, 9 was in deep trouble, the lawyer could come in with them. And the child would think the lawyer was helping them get through the meeting, which was true because they didn't want to fill in any paperwork. And they could adjourn the meetings and take their client out and discuss how to handle the meeting better, which was good. But really, the long term business was that the year 12s would mentor the younger girls, and that massively reduced the workload for the head of Key Stage 3, who, Key Stage 3 are a nightmare in all their personal friendship problems. If you can get the year 12s on board, they're a lot more efficient. They can sit there for hours listening to you know, friendship problems between year eights, but they're also very good at picking up if there's a real problem and then coming up and going, no, this is something serious. We need to, take this much more seriously. So that sort of thing was great.
And was there any pushback from other members of staff in that school that went, "Oh, this isn't really the way that we should be teaching. It's not really chalk and talk. This is something a little bit out there." I mean, did you get any criticism or any quiet criticism, sort of stabs in the back, as it were, from other members of staff who didn't agree with this method of teaching, as it were?
Not with that particular um, project because we couldn't have coped without the year 12s. We simply hadn't the staff. Both me and the head were having to teach. We had such a tight budget. Um, where I got kickback was in safeguarding, where in a girls' school you will get predators hanging around all the time. And some of the girls were in very vulnerable situations with hostile families. One was sleeping on the street and eventually was picked up by the police. And at 3 in the morning, I got a phone call because nobody would go and collect her. So the choice the police were facing was, were they going to section her under the Mental Health Act, or were they going to find somebody who'd take her? And I was the only person who'd go down and talk to them. So I went down and agreed. I had spare bedroom space anyway, and stuffed her in a spare bedroom that was far away from every other room in the house because she was quite an angry bunny at the time. And that was fine. She calmed down straight away. But it did lead to, I think, professional jealousy by one person who was gossiping with the governors, claiming that she thought, this was unprofessional, which, yes, it is. But I couldn't get any support from social services who were claiming it was a lifestyle choice. The girl was very vulnerable to gangs. She'd already been sexually abused. Um, I can't leave a child on the street.
So you had somebody in the school who disagreed with your course of action, thought it was unprofessional. How did you cope with that? And did you get support from the
Well,
senior members
nobody
of the management?
Well, it was fine under the first head. Under the second head, it wasn't.
So what
And
happened
it,
in that case?
um, I was, there was just an intimation that, I should put the child out. There was nowhere for the child to go. And, that I'd behaved unprofessionally, whatever. And I was very, very tired anyway. And I just said, well, I'll resign. It's fine. And my choice, I'd rather keep the child. I can't put a child on the street, I'm afraid. I'm really hopeless. And the child stayed. She's gone on to be very successful. She is earns a fortune and is a very successful accountant.
So at that, I just want to go back to that point where you said no to the system and you went, right, okay, well, ta-ta, I'm off. I'm sure it wasn't that simple, Charlotte. So I'm
No,
really keen just to find out a little bit more about your how what support you had, if any, at that point when you were making that decision? You know, I mean, did you have any support? I mean, did you speak to anybody in the family? Did you speak to friends to go, look, this is what I'm thinking about? Did anybody say, no, don't do it? I mean, how did that materialize?
At the time, I was lucky because my then partner was earning a reasonable salary because I could afford to do it. My mother was dying. My son was still quite young. We had been running the school on a very tight budget. The school now had a better budget, but the previous head had resigned, had to retire early with shingles, and I was worn out as well. So, and I have good friendship circles. I always have very good community around me. So I could walk away. And,
Sorry.
people always stay in touch as friends.
So is one of the learnings about how to say no to the system is one of the benefits or one of the strengths really of being able to say that is to have a good community around you, because I can imagine it can be a very lonely place to say
Oh,
no to
I
this.
don't, I, a later stage when I said no, when I, was being constructively dismissed, I was by that stage head of South Croydon Community Association. My community was absolutely rock solid. And that meant that it didn't matter. I could resign and go home and go, oh, this is the problem. And I'd have 20 or 30 people with various experiences going, okay, we'll pitch in. We've got some ideas on marketing. Okay, this is what you can do. Even my local delicatessen was going, it's okay, you can live on our out of date stock. There was Everybody was there for us, both emotionally and with practical solutions. It makes a very, very big difference. You don't want to be isolated.
If you hadn't have had that community around you, do you think your decision would have been different?
I think that the final time, I was under huge pressure to sign a non-disclosure agreement. The then head of the school I was constructively dismissed from got rid of about a third of the staff that year. He'd been recruited precisely to do that. And everybody else signed an NDA. I was the only one that didn't. And I was pretty confident of my ground, but it's much, much easier. Wasn't living in the town where the school was. I was out, you know, 30 minutes away, and the others might have had children at the school. They um, were in the town. They kept their heads down, did whatever was necessary to survive, but it nearly killed them. I know a lot of them really very, very went through extreme stress as a result.
You were brought up in on the Wirral Peninsula, if I remember rightly from our
Yes.
conversation, and from working class stock, very hard working. And do you think that your upbringing um, has assisted you with your, because you don't appear to be a person that gets walked over easily, if at all. Has it always been that way? Have you always been quite strong-willed? Have you had the inner power just to be able to go enough or no, or I'm walking away? Has it always been that way?
So my mother was a midwife, and midwives were very badly paid, but she had done her training in the Gorbals. She was pretty strong character, and her bottom line is never have a price. Never ever have a price. Never let
Never
anyone
have.
be able to buy you.
Okay.
So, and also very much that if something goes wrong, don't worry, tomorrow you can pick yourself up. And even like when I was revising for exams, she would go, why bother revising? There's no challenge. And her attitude was very much, you've got to be able to think flexibly and get out of difficult situations. And surviving is more important, and being able to survive is more important than having qualifications. If that makes sense.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
also, though, when I was having problems in the city of London with harassment from men, and I'd phone her, in tears, she was there for me 100%. Even if, I'd be saying, no, no, a bit of it's my fault, she'd go, no. And I think that part of the role of mothers is total unconditional support for their children. It gives them security in the world that they need. Everybody needs somebody who is unconditionally supportive.
The issue with misogyny, and I think the new parlance at the moment is this word manosphere. I don't want to go too deeply into this, but what you're talking about when you experienced it in the city, would that be the manosphere of its time, if that makes sense?
I think it is always the same that basically, if you're a well developed person, you can self regulate and you can make adult relationships. If you've got certain gaps in your development, you are going to struggle because you're a giant toddler. So let's take a character like Donald. Donald Trump is a giant toddler. He's got development of about a 2 year old. So he's very impulsive. He goes into toddler tantrums. He can't make adult relationships. So he applies exactly the same toddler behavior to relationships. He's abusive in them. When people get good development, they don't have such meltdowns. They don't make such ridiculous demands. They can communicate with people. And so I do think that being well developed is a really important part of what our education system ought to be doing. And England is not very good at it. We have moulded everything on a public school system that's very much about command and control.
I think you called it Govist, didn't you? Was it Govist in our previous?
Govist, yes. Well,
Yeah.
Gove designed the English education system, and he himself had a very dodgy and odd background, having been adopted and then been sent to some of the more austere of Scottish private schools. And he's got trauma upon trauma, and he can't work with his left and right sides. Therefore, his left and right eyes can't work together. Therefore, he can't understand anything as a whole. He must be learning by rote and by lots of coping strategies. So he projects his learning difficulties onto the world. So we've got this very controlling education system now that's obsessed by data and results, but actually doesn't look at the whole person at all. And it's bonkers.
And how do you think that could be changed? I mean, so I mean, let's say in I don't know 20 years, hopefully less, right? We get an education minister or somebody who's in charge of education who's a bit more worldly wise and has been on this this broadcast or is aware of what we're talking about. Do you think that then and only then, when somebody gets it, who's in that position of power, will things change?
I actually think the system is near breakdown. I think that at the grassroots, we're going to get change. So, like, I'm working with you guys in Scotland, and you're already, before we started this broadcast, saying we've got to have another meeting. We want to plan something in Scotland. I was talking earlier to chaps in Northern Ireland, exactly the same sort of conversations. The Welsh group are really ahead of the game with David Goodyear from Early Years Wales, who's really getting his head around how humans need to develop to be efficient learners. My own community, I got stopped in the street by a man who said, I need to talk to you. I need to, A, sort out my own mental health, but also I really want to understand and be part of this local group who are all obviously sorting themselves out. People are hungry for change. In my local schools, we got 40% of children are persistently absent. We can't, when I was a deputy head, out of 1,400 girls, one or two might have been persistently absent. And there would have been specific mental health issues, but not 40%. That is absolutely horrendous. That's telling us the whole system is at breakdown. You wouldn't run any production line with that kind of error rate.
Uh,
It's
and
insane.
And are you finding that certain areas of the country, and even in counties, are more proactive than others? I mean, we had a discussion again on Sunday, didn't we? You said that you find York sometimes difficult to penetrate in terms of your ideas and getting into the system.
Yeah, so it very much depends on your academy chains, it depends on individuals. And so, I'm really lucky with Early Years Wales. I went in for a day to train them. They then asked me to come back and they then sorted everything out. They really got it. And it's the individuals often that get it and then get excited about it because they can't go on any longer. I was in a nursery yesterday in Bradford. They've decided to get all their staff up to a very good level of development. So their staff are projecting good development on the children, and staff can support the parents to get good development. That's really radical thinking. And, it's brave to have a go at getting everything working properly, because at the moment, things are not working very well.
I mean, is the way that you're suggesting that we work and the way that you operate your organization fit to learn? I mean, is it an expensive route? I mean, is money the block here?
So we have a YouTube channel. 90% of what we do is there available for free. You can just go on YouTube, work your way through program after program, because I spent my COVID lockdown explaining how to go through every stage of child development to get a child well developed, because it was obvious to me in COVID things were going really badly wrong. And we've added a few simpler videos since, and explanations and other bits. I can even provide you videos in Chinese if you like. And then the expensive bit is sound therapy, but then if I'm doing it en masse in a school, we can do it relatively cheaply. So we can get unit costs down quite low.
You mentioned grassroots, and it's something that we talk about an awful lot up here in Scotland, led by Suzanne and many other brilliant people. Um, do you think that because you've changed lives? I mean, your organization has changed lives. If you look at the testimonials on your website, it's absolutely evident. Do you think if you had parents had a voice and said, "Look, do you know what? This has changed my child's life for the definitely for the better." Do you think if more people were speaking in those terms and showing the decision makers, how great and how effective the work is, do you think that would have an impact if members of the public became more interested in this, and there was some examples, of course, that we can show those decision makers and go, look how impactful this is, and look at the changes to lives and to learning that this makes.
No. So I presented to the Department of Education case studies and when they were calling for curriculum change. I may as well have not wasted my time. They are not at all interested in England in them. What they want are short-term studies because they're obsessed by data. What we need is literally grassroots change where people sort out their children and they empower themselves. So, and the problem is at the moment, most funding goes to very short-term studies. Yet when I'm going to change somebody, I've got to look at their motor skills, their sound, their vision, their cognitive skills. You're looking at many, many factors, not one or two. And you've got to understand how they all work together. You've got to understand if a child is in care, they're not going to be plastic. You've got to make them safe. I suspect at the moment the government don't want to hear that because a lot of children in care are not safe. And you would end up with some serious data. Also, I know if you looked at the data on how many children have got two eyes working well together, they wouldn't want to see that either because the answer is not many. And the there isn't any money in what I do. And is far too much lobbying and financing of government. So I've had people in government ask me for sums up to £8,000 in order to lobby government. I had to say not my own MP, who is totally virtuous, but herself is very good in terms that she is a neurophysiotherapist, so I can talk to her and communicate. But Rachel Maskell, my MP, stood up to the government over the cuts to benefits for vulnerable people last year and lost the Labour whip. And, had it restored quite recently. She herself gets gaslit and has to put up with a lot of garbage and is trying to convince people who have got degrees in PPE and law how humans need to develop. It's really hard. So I think getting things working in clusters at a grassroots level, getting examples outside Britain. I've got projects running in Italy and China. You know, where it's easiest, go. Where you've got a battle, don't exhaust yourself.
Pick your battles. It was interesting. Willie, our conversation with Willie French last week left me informed. It left me bewildered. It left me angry. And this conversation
Oh,
is doing something similar, I have to
I'm sorry.
say. It's all right. But so, and I'm hoping that people who are on this broadcast, if you like, are going through similar emotions. And there'll be some people on this who are very aware of what's going on in the system because they work in the system. And then you get Johnny come latelys like me who get very interested in this and go, what, eh? And I just can't understand, where I just can't understand where the blocks are. Do you think that when people go into politics, they change? So, for instance, if somebody has a family and they have the same challenges that we all have in terms of families, then they go into politics. Do you think there's some sort of change that makes them think differently to the rest of us?
It's who holds the power in politics. So what you've seen in English politics is we thought we were voting in a Labour government, and what we voted in is somebody who is funded, and it's a minority group who are controlling the power. So that tight little bloc who seem to be funded by the Israeli lobby seem to be controlling the power. And it seems to be a group around quite a right wing agenda around all sorts of things, but not actually getting to grips with the root causes of problems in a cost effective way. So, I mean, something as simple as moving the school age so that we've got a proper stage to develop infants to 7, 8, that we actually check people are ready to learn. And, you could train anybody in it, it's not difficult. It would be so sensible. That's what the rest of Europe are doing, basically. Most countries don't start children at 4 in formal education. I was in a school last week and I saw all these tables in the reception class. They've been told they absolutely had to have them to meet the handwriting guidelines. And I said, well, this will actually do terrible damage. We know research from the 80s, not the 80s, the 40s, that 20% of children will come in with visual problems. If you make them work on flat desks, after 5 years, 80% will have visual problems. And we're starting them at 4. And there were massive samples in the 1940s, 160,000 school children done by D.B. Harman, absolute, godfather of optometry. And we are just ignoring his work. And children, anyway, can't really focus properly at 4, not till 7 or 8. So, there's willful blindness in the system. There are
Yeah,
people making money. How people could be millionaires from phonics systems is a mystery to me.
I think
So
willful
it all
blindness.
feels very dirty, very grubby, and all about vested interests.
I'm going to invite questions onto the chat. So feel free to do that. If you've got any questions for Charlotte, please do that. A couple of things from me before we launch into the questions. What can we do, the people on this call, tomorrow morning when we get up? What can we do to start either pushing back or starting to make a difference?
Get ourselves fit to learn. I know that. So, like I said to you, get rid of your glasses. I'll send you the advice on how to do it. Do exercises to the point where your vision works so well you don't need to wear glasses if you're short-sighted.
Let me just camera to me. Thank you very much indeed. And yes, I've got these are fascinating books, by the way. And thank you for the information that you sent. I think one of the interesting things that I found out from Sound is Your Superpower, this book here, is I'll be able to sing like an angel if I do these exercises. It was interesting because we were on the call on Sunday, and you said to me completely out of the blue, you have an inner ear problem. And I went, what? Hello? Sorry. And you could tell that by my blink rate, apparently,
Yes.
which I was. So what does that mean for me then? So where will I struggle in terms of learning and retaining information then?
So your inner ear is like your junction box. And so you should look at a diagram of the vestibular system. And the vestibular system links the ear to the eyes, to the facial muscles, to the voice box. So sound, vision, and motor skills, it affects your balance and your sense of acceleration, deceleration. Sound is really pivotal to everything, and we don't check it at all. So if you've got disruption to auditory processing, when you come to read for meaning, your eyes will jump about and you won't have any idea. You'll think, oh, I just wasn't concentrating. But when you get your sound and vision working well together, you read things once and you have complete recall. It is so much easier. And what else can affect you? You can become much more agile if you get your inner ear working well, as well as singing in tune, and your sense of rhythm gets better. It it just actually makes you much healthier.
We're getting lots of. We'll post all this information as well. But the maze of learning, sound is your superpower, is this book here, and they are available if they go on to your website. It's all
Yes,
available there, isn't it? And the maze of learning, developing motor skills are the books that I have that I've been sent, and I've just started to read through them. And I've got to say that they're brilliantly easy to read. That for me, they're not overly scientific, they're not overly academic, which is something that would put me off. And it's very, very understandable. Lots of common sense, actually, in these books. But you've got the websites just being put into the
yes.
chat. What are the development strategies that were used in the nursery for staff and parents? Um, and
So you need to do something around rhythm, speech, language, getting children to breathe nasally, which is there are videos on YouTube about it, and making sure the primitive reflexes get integrated. So, as I say, if you send me emails, I will always reply sooner or later. If you send me a rude email, I'll reply even quicker. Basically, I want people to sort out the problems. I can't bear the state of modern children.
you're very focused, which is brilliant, on the development of youngsters, and and it's something that the system doesn't seem to be interested in. And you've mentioned that a lot of that is to do with data, probably numbers, I suppose, and things like return on investment and I mean, I suppose it's I think Willie touched on it last week as well. Was it's all about the numbers that stack up well for the organisations that make the decisions.
So, what we've ended up with is cramming children to pass exams so schools can tick boxes. We're not looking at the long-term investment. So, when I sorted my son out, it took us 18 months. At 6, he was blind. By 8, he was sighted again and could work with his motor skills, but was a bit nervous. And to be perfectly frank, he wasn't really a highly skilled learner until we got to secondary school, and suddenly he took off. But we had gone through every single pathway, making sure that everything was open. And while I was waiting, we went to lots of plays, we sang lots of songs, we danced lots of dances, we played lots of games and puzzles. I did not stress about anything. I just kept doing all the reading, kept supporting him. I knew he was good. I knew he could beat me at every wretched game. And if he could do that, it would eventually transfer into academic work. But he needed to be secure before he could go. And once he went, he went. His school were fantastic. At 12, they put him in for an A level in politics. They bumped him up a year, and he left school with 6 A levels and have been running umpteen clubs and whatever. Were amazing at giving him things to do and keeping him busy and using him as cheap labour.
I want to go back to a point you made earlier about parents, carers, guardians taking responsibility. If the government aren't prepared to do it, or they're not, or they're there's not the money, or whatever they're saying to us, they're not prepared. You're saying it's now down to the people that care for us to take on those responsibilities and those actions to develop our children.
That's hard. That's why I put so much up on YouTube. I think people have to work in teams because, and it's what I was saying to the staff at the nursery yesterday, doing exercises every day on your own is boring in the extreme. It's very rare that people can keep going. If you work in a team, you keep each other going. And my most successful situations are when, family bring a child to me to get them sorted. And I thank the child for bringing the parents. And then we assess everyone. And at the end, they all go away agreeing they're going to do the exercises together as a team. And then every few days they celebrate. They've done another 3 days and they have a special pizza lunch or whatever. Just little celebrations say, well done, we've kept going, because to get everything sorted out is a tedious journey. I speak from experience.
Yeah, and this is the point here. How do you keep going?
Because my son would have been a blind cripple if I hadn't sorted the mess out. No optician was going to come and help me, no educational psychologist, nobody else had a solution. I was going to have a child who was a bad-tempered blind cripple. Between you and me and the rest of the people listening, I had a very bad-tempered, violent father. And he knew when he went into the army and did basic training, for the first time he could tie his shoelaces. So when I speak about domestic violence and misogyny and stuff stemming from poor development, I speak from first-hand experience. And I know my father loved me, but he couldn't express it. And, you know, he just never learned how to be happy in life. I really, really believe that it is that important for everybody to be empowered with the skills to communicate and to live lives where they're at peace with themselves.
How financially comfortable do you have to be to say no to the system?
Well, as in, yes, in London I had lodgers and I was constantly surviving, and I did live on a lot of out of date stock in my time, and I was very, very well supported by my community. It is much, much easier now because I sold the London house, moved to York, bought a cheap house. I didn't want anything expensive anyway. So I own my house outright. I have a heat pump. I'm not worried about the situation with the Middle East, unlike everybody else. And I can survive perfectly well anyway without heating. So I know I can survive and nothing can affect me. And I think that for most people, they need to be in that position. It is very, very hard if you can't afford to make ends meet and you're being bullied at work. It's really hard. And the employment situation now is very complicated because of AI. So,
Your
you know,
resilience um, it fascinates me, I have to say, because not many people. Maybe they would. Maybe they've got the will, or the inner will, or they want to do what you've done, but there's lots of variances stopping them doing that. So that might be around family security, paying a mortgage, getting on at work, offending people. So out of offending people, conflict, and consequences of saying no. Which of those do you think is probably the most worrying or the most prevalent? Is it about offending? Is it about the conflict? Is it about the consequences?
I think conflict, if somebody makes a serious threat. So, for instance, I'm barred from Facebook. I had a run in with the Education Endowment Foundation. There's a guy there who has a problem with me. And I've had letters from them, but when I complained that there was no way they had the authority to write such letters, they backed down. But you can get threats, and if you are on your own and you're not really feeling secure, threat after threat after threat is no fun.
So, sorry, has Facebook cancelled you? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, yes. I think it's the same person as that I had the problems with at the Education Endowment Foundation, and that he was making complaints because I was trying to explain that it is possible to sort out people's integration of motor skills and vision and stop their eyes jumping at the midline, and that stops dyslexia. And he was really did not want anyone to say that. And so I think that was the complaint that got me barred.
Good grief.
So
Okay.
there's lots of this garbage going on.
Yeah, yeah. I've got any advice on how to teach a 12-year-old boy from Brazil English who has moved to Scotland 3 weeks ago? He cannot get his head around why we have an alphabet but use phonics to pronounce words. Frankly, neither can I, says this.
No, quite. So he's quite right. The problem when we're within 6 weeks of birth, we tune our ear to our mother tongue, and it takes months to retune your sound range to another language. And oft some people can never retune it unless they do sound therapy. So if you contact me, I can set up some sound therapy to retune his ears to the sound range for the English language, and that will make things much easier. If that makes
And
sense.
absolutely. And Charlotte, this is from Shelley. Charlotte, are you saying that your exercises help everyone with learning difficulties such as dyslexia, sight, ADHD, etc.?
Yes. So basically, I'm saying most of those things are not what people are saying they are. The developmental delays caused by our modern lifestyles, and that we should be moving vastly more and out in the daylight vastly more and moving our eyes more. We need to be more upright to keep clear airways, have better diets, to have better developed faces. But basically, you can repair most of this damage and get people to the state where they can coherently work with sound, vision, and motor skills. Honestly, if I can get my son from blind to sighted, and I mean, he'd forgotten he had a left side, and it really looked like he might end up in a wheelchair at one stage. If I can get him running around, climbing the Alps, you can do anything. Humans are very plastic, and we need to work layer by layer, checking every single thing is in place developmentally.
Have the have the medical profession, engaged in this with you at all? I mean, have they, I mean, and if they have, what's been the outcome?
So um, in China, I work on a project with the Shenzhen rehab hospitals. The Chinese understand holistic development far better than Westerns. In Italy, I work on projects where doctors and medical charities are involved. In the UK, the NHS as a whole, no. I am going to be speaking next month to an East Midlands mental health group about work we could do around adults. So it is very difficult to penetrate the NHS. When I've been to briefings about how you can penetrate the NHS, we go back to that good old song, money, money, money. And you've got to pay so much money up front and all the rest. And even getting payments out of the NHS is very difficult because if you're not on the right supplier list and it takes months to get payments. Da, 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 da. And oh, I also briefed the Ukrainian doctors. At the start of this conflict, they came to see me about trauma.
Have you heard about kinetic letters handwriting scheme? If yes, what do you think about it?
So I haven't particularly looked at it in detail. My bottom line with handwriting is you can't really handwrite properly because it's a fine motor skill control till you've got control of your gross motor skills. Your gross motor skills, even if you're the most well-developed child on the planet, you haven't got proper postural control in place until 7. You haven't got full bilateral integration of motor skills until 7. Your eyes can't focus properly in the near range until 7 or 8. This is assuming you're developing well. Your auditory processing of the sounds of the English language are fully developed by 7 or 8. Therefore, to ask somebody to combine all their senses and motor skills and to start to write is a very complex task. And so, unless you wait and get all the development in place, you are going to cause problems. So, if you look at Rishi Sunak, he's had all the money spent on his education, but he works with just his left eye to the right of his midline. Look at any photograph of him writing, and that affects his perception of anything as a whole.
That's
So we
amazing.
don't really want to go there. We want to get all the development in place. We want all the foundations well laid. You wouldn't build a house like this. Don't build a child like this. Get them to the point they can be highly skilled and really think about complex writing as being something we're going to be doing probably at Key Stage 3.
There's lots of messages on here, lots of messages of support, people who support your work. A few more questions coming in that are a little bit too deep to ask in the last 2 minutes of the program, but I'm sure that we'll get them to you and we'll be able to answer those through the team in the background here. They're all coming in now. It always happens with the last 5 minutes to go. Charlotte, wonderful. What I'm taking away from this is, in order to be able to say no to the system, we need community, we need people around us, we
Yep,
need faith, we need courage, which you have in spades, um, and
a
the
bit
and
mad.
well, it helps, aren't we all? But also, um, grassroots is crucial to this. If it's not going to happen in Westminster or Holyrood or in the Welsh Senate, but it is actually in Wales, isn't it? Forgive me. We've got to take matters into our own hands. Is what I'm taking away from this conversation. Would
Yes,
that be a fair?
yes. And include your local politicians. If they're willing to listen and get involved, include them. But I think they'll find they're powerless. But in the long term, we'll have the evidence.
Charlotte, it's been wonderful. I knew from the moment I met you on Sunday that we'd have this sort of conversation, but our hour is up, I'm afraid. But Charlotte
Thank you.
Davies, all power to you and fit to learn and your endeavours in the future. Thank you so much for being part of this conversation. Please do join us next week when our guest will be the real David Cameron. From me, Gary Robinson, and the rest of the team. See you next week. Take care. Bye bye.